tonight, the purpose of the meeting is to introduce these possible sites, and then for people to go up, and you were given stickers, and you can put a sticker on the site that you would select. And then this information will be gathered and taken back to the council for further discussion. So, getting started with the presentation, briefly, when you look at the history of the City Hall here in Wilmer, back in the 1800s, this is Richard England did this research. This was the first City Hall, and I believe it was the city clerk's building, her house. And then later it moved in the 1800s, and most of you are familiar with the auditorium there in 1934, it's still standing today. And then in the 1950s, our current utility building. At one time, that was the City Hall. And then from 1974, we've been located in, my understanding, it was an ACMC medical building.
Lakeland Medical Center.
Lakeland?
Yeah.
Okay, I was wrong, but it was a medical center, right? Okay. That was constructed in 1948, and it's still, the design is pretty much the way it was when it was originally built. Some of the changes in city government, we could talk about, efficient use of services to the employees and to the citizens as they come in to use the City Hall. We don't have a council chambers, which is very unusual for a City Hall. Most City Halls do have their own council chambers, and the changing demands for city government. As you know, whenever you design a building, you build it for that particular use. Obviously, when you build a medical building, you don't build it to be a City Hall. One of the communities I was in, we had a library that was designed to be a library, not a City Hall. And you could always tell those type of things. Back in 2016, the city commissioned a study be done of all the buildings and assets within the city, and the City Hall was right at the top of the list as far as efficient use, lifetime, the cost of operating that building, and all those things considered. And I will tell you that even just within the year that I've been here, the elevator has broken down twice in that facility and has locked a couple people in that elevator for a little while. We've had some air quality issues in that facility. We've had some water issues. We've had some electrical issues. And so you have to make a decision at some point when you have a building like that. Are you going to spend money and keep dropping money in that building, or would it be more efficient to build something new? The building, like I said, is over 70 years old. It was designed for a different use. The air quality, there has been some infestations over the years. The aging mechanical and electrical and the plumbing also. So some of these things were the consideration of the council. When we had our retreat last year, they also determined at that time, along with the engineering study, that the City Hall should be a priority, and that's why it was budgeted for in the 2018. Now, some of these things you can't measure as much, but when you talk about image of a City Hall, when you go to a town or a community, and you look at the City Hall, and you look at the history of the United States, the City Hall generally was a symbol of a community and the pride and image that they wish to project. And that's why you see some very ornate city halls and capitol buildings around the United States. We're not saying that that's the goal of the City Hall here, but it's something that was in consideration when looking at it. The security on a building, obviously, as we change times from everything from the electronics to the recent shootings throughout the United States, it's always a reason of concern that you have a building that is secure not only for the employees and elected officials, but for the public, so that they feel safe going to that building. And then the city council chambers, as we said earlier, and accessibility. So at this time, I'm going to ask Richard to come up, and he's going to talk briefly about the sites and how we arrived at these sites, and then after that, the mayor will come up. So Richard?
Good evening. I've had the privilege to work with a good committee for about 5 months, and we start the process by looking at the big picture and working to details. In every building, there's all kinds of very important things that people are interested in, but the way to organize it is you look at the big picture and we end up with the details. The biggest picture item by far is where should the building be? And that's really the stage we are right now. Okay, yeah. These are some of the areas that we came up with. There's a number of important parts of the City Hall, but the ones that relate to the location, these were the 6 that we really focused on. The one that isn't noted here is, everybody asks about, the first question is usually, what is the cost? And at this stage, we're looking at these. The building above ground could be the same, if it's a new building, could be the same cost at any of these sites. Below ground, it could vary immensely, but you can't put a number on that until you do soil borings, a survey, buying the price, parking, a whole series of issues that can vary. And so on each of the sites that we're looking at, it's not one specific location. Each one could have a new building, several of them could have remodeling, several have multiple sites that could show. So it's a general area that we would be focusing on, and the prices would change for all of those. When you look at these, as I mentioned, the City Hall is normally, in the traditional towns, they surveyed and put a town square, and they had a town hall for a town like this in the middle of a park. It was an important building. It showed the community had arrived, and there was a visual part of that. When we designed the building, there's really 2 major parts of the building we end up with. One will be an efficient office building, a place where city staff can be housed, they can do their work, they can interchange with the public. The public needs to have a very efficient and secure means of that interaction. The other part is the local legislative deliberation area where the city council meets. City council only, they're regular citizens, but when they're in session, they have a special power. And they traditionally would have an area that's a formal meeting, and a formal setting is a normal arrangement for that. It doesn't have to be luxurious, but it should have dignity, that it's a place where these people in a representative democracy have been elected to represent and make decisions for the public. And they need to have a place that would relate to that. We ended up, after looking at many sites, 4 possible sites. One is East Highway 12, which was known as the Elm Lane Mobile Home Park. It's a lot more land than is needed for the City Hall. So there's several variations there. Another one is the existing City Hall site. The city owns that land. Block 50 is owned by the city also. It's a parking lot. That's the parking lot at Bethel Church. And the Candy Mall. I think you've all heard that the Candy Mall is has some vacant space. They're looking for other things. We look at the East Highway 12 first, at Elm Lane. Each of these drawings, we have, the existing building is about 23,000 square feet. The brown square is about 11,000 square feet as if it's a 2-story building. 70 parking spaces take about that line. So you can see on that site, the entire site is not needed, but it's a relative area. It's on a major highway with good access. It's sort of an unused area. It has been a blighted area for the city. This could stimulate development in a side of the town that has not had as much development as other sides of the town. And there's a lot of land to do a number of things there. It is a large enough property, so it would be possible that the city could co-locate public works and municipal utilities on one piece of land. That isn't the goal right now, but the land is there. Right now, we're only talking about a city hall, but when you're selecting a site, there could be other uses to that. The second one is the Candy Mall. They have land. It could be, everybody's aware that Burberger's is empty. They've got other vacant spaces. We could, that would be a possibility. It's been plotted for 40 years some outlots, and I think along the street that you often drive by on 5th Street, I think that's planned to be outlots for some development. I'm sure those are available. Also on this site, it could be other sites in the area. It wouldn't necessarily have to be just that site. There could be other pieces available. On the remodeling, everybody sees, and one of the challenges facing the country, we have a lot of big box retailers available all over the country. And it is a real challenge. And when you change the use of a building, there is a lot of things that have to happen. The biggest use of a big box store is another big box store. But if that isn't possible, you have remodeling. And if we look at the cost for a city hall, we often think, well, that would be really a cheap deal. But you have to buy the building. And typically, if you take a city hall, in simple terms of cost, 1/3 of the money above ground is building a weather-tight enclosure. 1/3 is everything you see inside. 1/3 is your mechanical and electrical systems. In a building like that, the building box is solid and sturdy, but yet for a city hall, typically we need windows. We need a transparent, efficient office space. We can saw wind holes in the windows, but that's a cost that takes that part of it. Everything you see inside would be new, because right now it's a wide open space. It'd be subdivided in finishes, walls, partitions, lighting, everything. And the mechanical systems, it was right now it's air conditioning with big units, just blowing area in a big open area. And when you have a building subdivided in smaller spaces, meeting rooms, we need temperature control for the different kinds of uses. Conference rooms are full of people and they're empty with people. And so there gets to be significant costs that deal with that. The Block 50 Bethel Church block, that is a block that the city has looked for. I can remember some 20, 25 years ago, there was a plan that would be a city hall there. A lot of things have been discussed about that block for years. The location we're showing it is at the corner of Trott and 5th, and using some of the other parking land. One of the things that could make this one stand out is that there has been a parking developed or proposal for parking here on and off ever since I came to town 40-some years ago. And this could be a partnership with Rice Hospital. Something could happen there, and this might be a stimulus for something like that. And then the fourth site is the existing City Hall site. That is owned. I think we're all familiar with it. Parking is always a concern. The parking lot that's shown over on the extreme west side, over here, handles 25 people. And the staff in the building is 27, 28 or so. So that really could meet their parking needs. And then for council meetings, you need more space. But that parking lot is not overused. I don't know that it's ever full. And so there is, that could work out. One of the things that make this site unique is the city auditorium. I don't think anybody is interested in getting rid of the city auditorium. It's a pride and joy of everybody in the community, but it's underused. When it was built, it was a place for civic events, shows, circuses, boxing matches, athletic events. And the schools have been built that took some, the Armory took some. Now the Civic Center has really replaced most of the uses there. It's a very underutilized room. There's a war memorial room that is a sacred room for a lot of people, but it's used maybe one day a year. And I think making that available to people would be the best use. And if it was combined with City Hall, things like Rack 8 and the technology could theoretically be in the second and third floors on the west side, existing space. And the addition could provide accessibility to those levels. It has been considered, I think last fall or last year ago, some people were thinking of the Hardware Hank building. And that it could be, it might make the auditorium more usable. It may or may not be included with something that's considered here. The process to select the site. The facility committee has met and discussed the needs for a city hall. What are the issues of a site? They presented to several work sessions at the city council and the city council in session also. Tonight is number 3, public input meeting. And later on, after this meeting, this will go back onto the city council. After questions here, we have some green tabs here. They'll be handed out. Everybody gets four tabs, and you can vote 4 times. You can vote 4 times for one site, one for split it up any way you wish. You also could decide on this plan, if you think there's another site that's better, or another area, you can write something on that plan. The city council would take this under advisement, and they will deliberate this later. Okay, I'd like to turn it over to Amir.
First of all, I want to thank Richard and Ike for their presentations. Didn't know this was going to be quite this long, maybe I need to do this, but anyways. But I also want to make sure to point out, we do have a number of council members here and past council members here. So we have Councilmember Alvarado here, we have Councilmember Meske here, we have Councilmember Schwantes, Councilmember Nelson with us, and then past council members, we have past Councilmember Johnson here, past Councilmember Reese here. Oh, Ron Christensen's back there too. Ron is here. I can see you, Ron. You were standing behind Dave when I was introducing people. And then we have past Mayor Les Heitke here as well. And so we do have a good cross-section of our community represented here. I want to thank all of you for being here. It's important to have you here to get this public input piece. And so at this point, both Ike and Richard have kind of talked about the process we're going to use. So we'll be using a green tag process, and each person will be given the green tags. You can put one tag up there, you can put all 4 tags up there, whatever you choose to do. And then additionally, we do have Post-it notes, and so if you have a comment that you want to add to a particular site, there's pens up here along with the Post-it notes. You can take and add those, and you can bring those and place those up here. So, past Councilmember Tinklenberg is here as well. He's having trouble with his phone. I had to keep looking and going, who is that guy? I kind of want to look away, but you know, you always want attention wherever you go, and you have your wife with you, and I see her poking you in the ribs. So, but anyways, we know what that's all about. We've all been there. But anyways, so we've got good cross-representation of the community, and so at this point, I would like to just see if there's any questions people have. If people have questions on the process. And again, it's imperative because there was conversations out there that the decision was going to be made this evening that we're going to select a site through a committee process of the public, and then that was what we're going to move forward to. We just need to understand that the process is going to be the council will make that decision, and we'll move that forward. And also, if you're opposed to the city hall, Councilmember Plowman made that very clear at the last meeting. If people are opposed to it, we want to hear from you too. We just don't want a bunch of naysayers. If you're opposed to it, let us know, but be respectful at the same time. So, Bill, go ahead.
What kind of a timeline do you think it is after this evening?
So after this evening, it would come back to the council probably within the next month. And then if the selection was made at that first meeting we had, then we may engage Richard's services a little bit deeper. So I think we're within being in the ground, being pounding nails, those types of things, someplace in the next 3 months to 2 years. So it's not necessarily going to happen bang, bang, bang.
I'm wondering if anybody has considered the idea of the community center, which also is a building that was on the list of buildings that need to be looked at. Putting the community center and the city offices together at one site.
So, can everybody hear the questions? You want me to repeat them or not? The question is, should we combine the community center and the city hall together? So if you take a look at the, when this was presented to council, we presented it with 4 different pieces. One was the city hall, the community center, RAC 8, pull that list back up. Well, anyways, there was 4 buildings that we looked at. Yeah, looking at the MUC. And so we looked at those facilities and we said, how can we combine those facilities together? So that conversation has happened. The conversation for tonight is the city hall location because the council has not vetted the joint facility at this point. If the choice was to go with that joint facility, that they then may extend our time frame out more towards that 2-year time frame.
With that comment, to decide which location would be best, don't we need to know what your goals are of that facility?
The goals of the,
Truly, like if you said, if your goal would be to combine all 4, then you don't want to be landlocked in a location that couldn't have all 4.
I think that for the purpose of the discussion tonight is exactly what Ike and Richard talked about. And that is that we want to know what the community wants for the city hall. If we say we want it at the existing site, we know we can look at joint facilities. If we say we want it at the former L Lane property, we know we can look at joint facilities. If we select this site, might not be quite as easy. We select this site, it may not be quite as easy. It still could happen, but it would look differently. The thing of it is with the municipal utilities, is we're looking at a pole yard and those types of things. You don't want that in the downtown area. They want all of their functions together. So block 50 would not work for that, and the existing city hall site would not work for that. So some of those conversations are all intertwined, and you can't circle everything in the wagon and try to get everything in one bite. So that's why we're breaking it out the way we are. Doug?
Yeah, Mayor, at the existing city hall site, the existing city hall itself has some problems. And if you're going to utilize that facility, there's the problem of maintaining offices. So how do you handle that? I mean, would that building be remodeled or?
At this time, the design would be is that we would tear that building down, start over from zero, and the staff there would be located off-site at another location. They would function there until that building was built and then come back. That's one possibility. But we'd leave that to the administrator to determine what those functions would look like.
If you were to do that, how disruptive is that going to be to kind of the city operations? You think you could get an office for a year and not be too terribly pressed?
Well, one of the things that we've talked about is relocating out to the community center and just putting up some Herman Miller panels, and then we can just function there. We haven't vetted down that a long ways because we don't know which way we're going. The thing of it that we have to be careful of is that we're not looking at our feet, that we're looking out, and that a 1-year disruption in services really is nothing when you're looking at a 50-year project. And so this, we should be looking at, as we can tell, we moved into this building in the 70s. If we say we're going to be here for a minimum of 30 years, we need to look to the future. We can't look behind ourselves or look at our feet. That's my opinion. And again, there's council members here, and if you disagree with me, point it out. But I've got the mic at this point, so.
I'll take it from you, Mayor.
There you go.
So, on one hand, Liz is absolutely correct. I think as a community, the council needs to decide what are our goals. Are we looking at more facilities? As you mentioned, a lot of Wilmer's growth has taken those things that used to happen at the auditorium to the local schools, to your former, your Lincolns and your Garfields and that. Well, now those are gone, but we have our Lakeland, our Roosevelt, our Kennedy, the high school. Those things are happening at those locations now. Wilmer is a very different community. I wasn't here 70 years ago when the city hall was put in, but I'm here now, and I probably won't be here in 70 years again, but we need to look at what is our goal? What do we really want out of our city hall? Does it need to be downtown? I teach junior achievement to 3rd graders that your town hall is usually downtown. But Wilmer's a very progressive community, I feel. We're a very diverse community. We have a lot of things that are great for us. And the city hall, I think, needs to reflect that wherever the location is.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Mayor, if I could, when you were talking about the Post-it notes, you said, for comments, but also on this poster board here, if you have an address or a location, so if you think it should be, down on First Street and whatever, you can put that address on a Post-it note and then stick that on this board. I just wanted to bring that up.
Wow.
It seems that the development of a political consensus among a wider swath of the community is the component that's missing so far. And maybe that's part of the reason for having this meeting today. My question would be, rather than focusing right now on which location you'd want to have a city hall, wouldn't you first rather get consensus from the greater community as to whether they feel they need a new city hall at all? And we have an opportunity to do that coming up in the next 5 months, because we have a general election through which we could have a referendum, and then find out firsthand if people consider this a priority or not.
Yeah, and that is the reason, Bob, that's the reason we're having this conversation tonight. And if the consensus of this group is that we, yes, look at something for the future, if that then becomes, on your post-it note, you can certainly write that, post that we think this should go to a general election. You can make that comment, it should go to a general election. And if that is the direction we go, that's the direction we'll go.
Well, I guess I'm asking for your opinion on it, because much like the way we handled the construction of a school, we did that through a referendum. Why wouldn't we do the same here?
The difference between this and that is that the governing body of the school board put the question out there. What we're doing is we're putting the question of, do you want a new city hall or not? So that's where we're at with that question. So you can certainly write it up as an opinion.
The school has to have a public referendum because they issue, bonds, and you people are going to pay for it.
It's apples and oranges.
Sounds like you're going to pay for some of this through budgets and cash flow and reserves, maybe?
We will work through all of that. That has not all been determined yet. It was
Yeah.
placed in the budget.
So you're not asking the public to borrow any money.
Right. At this point, we put $8.5 million in the budget, and the funding source was yet to be determined, and that included both the Civic Center and the City Hall. What we've done now is carved out the City Hall piece, and we're looking at about a $4 million project for that.
Can I just add to that with the question of, do we need a new city hall or not? From the perspective of, as you said, when city halls are put into a town, they're your crowning glory. They're what cities are proud of that they have typically. And coming into Wilmer, is anyone proud of our building? I mean, it's there, it works, it functions, but new employees coming in, new residents coming in, we have something that, we have great employees there. Let's give them a great space to work. Let's give them what they need and what other people want to come into town for. So I think the foot traffic is a concern of mine. How much foot traffic do you get? But do we need a new building? I think we do, just because it's 70 years old. I mean, yeah, my house might be, well, my house is about 40 years old, but your house might be 70 years old, but there are different factors in why that might be a better building and why that can last longer. So those are just my thoughts on why we should have a new building. It should be one of our crowning glories in town. So.
And I think that's what the council chose when we had our retreat, which Mr. Holland had mentioned. This was one of our priorities. We had 3 priorities. This was one of them. In the past, we did not do a good job of looking to the future, and this is an opportunity for us to look to the future. And I agree 100% with what you're saying. I mean, people should be proud to come to our city hall. I was at a meeting just this afternoon at 2:30, and as I'm sitting there, someone comes up to me and says, "Where's City Hall?" And I explained where City Hall is, and they said, "That's your City Hall?" And it was a newcomer to the community, somebody that hadn't lived here very long. But, I mean, that does reflect, do you want to show a prosperous, growing community? Or do you want to show, when we were meeting yesterday, I believe, Bruce, I looked over at Bruce, it kind of reminded me of it when I looked at Bruce, but, we've talked about this for over 10 years. I mean, it isn't like we just, fell off a turnip truck last night and said, let's build a city hall. I remember Mick Schmitz here, former city administrator, we looked at Garfield, we looked at the old Bragg Bank building, actually looked at that twice. There were a couple other buildings that we looked at for different city hall buildings, and the council didn't support any of those decisions, so they never moved forward. And so at this point, we've got a council that said one of our priorities is to look at a new building for our citizens to better serve them. And so that's why we have the meeting tonight. And this process, if you want to look at it, really started, like Ike said, a year ago. his first week here, we had our retreat where this was identified as a priority. And then I placed it in the budget last year with a placeholder. And so that budget process was presented to council. Did we decide last night or yesterday? That was September of last year we presented it. So, you know, we're really not moving. When you take a look at 10 years ago when we started talking about this, then you take the council to talk about it for a year, and then you take a look that it was in the budget in front of the council in September, and then now we're June. You know, we're really not moving that fast. You know, some of the stuff might look like we're moving faster than we really are, but our committee's been meeting, what did you say, 3 months we've been meeting? Approximately? 6 months? So it's been in front of council 2 or 3 times. So, Jerry?
The Candy Mall, would that be leased or bought?
We are entertaining both options. One would be leased if it was inside of the structure. The other, as Mr. Engen talked about, would be freestanding building in one of 2 or 3 different locations. We have not had those conversations yet because we're waiting for tonight.
Just a point with the Candy Mall site. Most areas of malls like that are usually interested in land leases for the ground underneath the buildings, as they did with Starbucks, I think. Just a concern. They may want to spin off some ownership there too, but
And again, we haven't looked into any of those details at this point. They're just site locations that are being identified. So what we're going to do is, I'm sorry, yes ma'am?
One of the concerns that's always mentioned about downtown is parking. Block 50 would take a lot of parking space out of the picture for the library, for Rice Hospital, for Bethel Church. It sounds like there could be the possibility of a parking ramp, which would be possibly years down the road. Isn't that a concern to take that much parking space away from the city when it's already a concern?
Well, I think if you take a look at the downtown site, and I'm not defending any site, but I'll defend this a little bit. If you take a look at this site here, and if you take a look at the plan that was in place probably 20 plus years ago, that called for a city hall, an office, and some office space, and then a parking ramp. In Richard's presentation, he said that if we looked at that, we'd probably look at partnerships with Carousel and other downtown people. So those are things that depend upon, I mean, if we decide that we're going to East Highway 12, we don't have to have the conversation with Carousel. If we decide we're going to the existing City Hall site, we don't have to worry about parking lot, we don't have to worry about East Highway 12, we don't have to worry about the Candy Mall. So today we're trying to get some consensus on what direction should we look at, what direction should we go. Based on that input, then we'll determine the site location that we start then putting more time into.
So 51 people are going to make a decision how this moves forward?
I'm sorry?
51 people are going to make a decision on how this moves forward on the voting tonight?
9 people will make the decision.
Well, you're talking about the people are going to put Post-it notes out. There's 51 people here. You know, and what would be interesting to know is how has City Hall changed from 1950 or something like that to now? The engineering department, since the advent of computers. In the past, we used to look at the electrical needs. Now we're all running LED lights, LED monitors, Wi-Fi. You know, we're not pulling wires around as much. They spawned off the tax department over to the county, the property tax department. The county's building down there, or the basement floor is open, which engineering could be down there, or finance, or somebody that has a need for a backbone on the Wi-Fi they have over there. But what's going to be the needs 30 years in the future? We're going to have a mayor's office, we're going to have a couple of receptionists up front, city planning and stuff like that. But what are the needs with computers and things like that? Are we going to need that overhead? And the utilities, as soon as they shut off the heat, they're shutting off the power plant. And there's 8 women working in that office or so that they can move down to one of the other offices and remodel, so that really wouldn't be an overhead. But everybody talks about downtown. And if you guys look away from downtown, what's that going to say to all the other businessmen that are downtown? You know, that's come up numerous times. If the courthouse pulls out and moves out, and they want to go out on the hill or something. I think if they're going to look at anything downtown, you know, and money, parking, cars are getting a little bit smaller. And parking has changed in the last 5 years. And it used to be pretty dead downtown almost all the time. But since the Somalis are a lot more active and everything like that, downtown looks like it used to in the 1950s from the pictures. And I have a lot of walls of pictures that have shown what happens. The courthouse has changed, the public library has changed, you know, it's a lot of buildings that get tore down. So I would rather see you guys come back with a lot more information of what's the LEED certification and what are you guys putting into it versus just some spots. You know, I guess that's my input.
Brett? I'm partial to a downtown location. I think accessibility has to do with walking and biking as well as driving a car. I'm also concerned about aesthetics, and like it should be a building that people of the community are proud of. I'd be curious if Richard has any general ideas of if it were to go in the existing location of how to make that compatible and build off the aesthetics of the existing auditorium.
And again, those one-on-one conversations, we're not gonna get into those types.
No, but I'm just curious if he has anything, you know, if he can generally see something right now in his mind's eye about that possibility of.
Yeah, we talked about a building, and that building being more, don't need 10 minutes.
No.
Quick.
10 seconds. We don't have any preconceived ideas on any of these sites. On that site, the auditorium is really an urban building built with property lines, and we could do something related to that. It wouldn't be an historic building, it would be a modern building. It would be something that will have glass, it would be open, inviting, that still have security built into it that's needed. It'll be energy efficient, whether it's LEED certified, that's a question. We'd welcome that, but that's a question that we have to talk to the council. But I think that it could blend in. It could be linked to the lobby of the auditorium. It relates to how people enter that building.
Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the idea of getting as many people involved as possible in making the decision whether to go forward or how to go forward. Maybe we're missing something here. Everybody that lives in town gets a utilities bill. And we own the utilities. Maybe we could send a note out and see how many we get back of just a few questions on there, whether to move forward, and then the 4 sites on there. Instead of 51 people in here deciding which site is right for City Hall. Good idea?
Certainly something that council can consider, correct?
Mr. Mayor, and council members that are here, I'm pleased to see that finally the city's tackling this problem. I spent a lot of time in the current city office building, and it is not conducive to any kind of work environment. To get a really good picture of that, all you would have to do is spend some time in the basement of City Hall and swat away the cockroaches and squeegee the water off the floors to get at some of the records that are needed from time to time. We've spent a lot of time over the years, and you mentioned the 2 projects that I worked on specifically, and one was the former bank building and then the Garfield School. There were other ideas that surfaced from time to time, but my point is that we've been focusing on this as a problem area for many years, and the city has changed. It's grown, it's diversified, and having said all of this, in my opinion, the City Hall should be at the current location. Tear down the building, put up a new one that reflects the quality of life that we all share here in Willmar.
Thank you.
I feel Willmar is a economic center, and when we're looking forward to the next 50 years here, I just see too many limitations in the downtown. The investment in this community has not been in the downtown primarily. We're a growing community, and I myself, I'm not for the downtown. I just feel that there's other sites that are available that are more conducive to the future than the downtown.
Thank you. Kim?
My question, you mentioned that you'd put this in the budget, the expense, and the figure I heard was like 8.5 million.
Correct.
And
For
then,
both buildings.
Yeah, for both buildings, and you said about approximately 4 million of that would be allocated to, if it was just in the City Hall, for example.
That's what I said.
Let me say that's budgeted, was that just placed in the CIP, the capital improvement program for the city?
It was placed as a placeholder. There were no actual dollars assigned.
Well, that's my question. I mean, I think we need to clarify that for the public, that the money isn't there. And as I recall, when I was on the council, we had about around $1 million, give or take, a year for excess funds for spending for what our needs were. And the city was behind on numerous things of an infrastructure nature, primarily like the ice making equipment, the compressors out at the Civic Center and the Blue Line Club. And the last I heard, the estimated cost was like $3.5 million, and the city, that's been sitting there forever. It's, and remains still in a state of rather little precarious, I would say. So my question goes to not just the merits of the project, and I think it has merit, but I always like to know how are we going to pay for this? And it seems to me that the city has 3 major sources of income: local government aid, utilities and the hospital, and real estate taxes. And the only one that I see that the city can look at and probably raise money will be our real estate taxes. I don't see those other 2 sources as growing contributors to our financial needs. So my question would be, it's kind of similar to when the school has a bond issue, which the law requires that it be passed by the voters. They come forward and tell us before we vote approximately what our taxes are going to increase, and they're pretty accurate. They give us a really clear picture. And I guess I would like to have some idea of how our future real estate taxes might be affected by the construction of a new city hall, when the money really isn't there yet.
There's a couple different sources that we've identified. One is that there could be a partial taking of monies out of the current funds that are there. Could take money from that. Or we could take and look at bonding. Those decisions have not been made. Those decisions do need to be made. You're correct. Your question or your comment about the Civic Center, somebody on the council, or Bruce, help me out here, but I believe that that is funded at about $2.7 million. 2.7 million, and that the contract has been let, and that project will be done this year. Carol?
My comment, I would agree with Mr. Schmidt about keeping it downtown. Again, as a person that believes that downtown is a heart of the city, you can say, oh, it's all developing along First Street. It still is. That's along First Street, and that's retail space. The City Hall, in my opinion, should be downtown where it is. That's a good location for it. Just make it, as others have talked about, make it a showcase. The one thing that I hear comments about, well, the downtown is dying. I say, we as a city need to not desert our downtown. We need to invest in it. And I think this would be the way it is, should be.
The downtown is ruined, sorry.
Additional comments or questions? Okay, so we're going to have, there's council members here. I've identified those already. Councilmember Osmus has joined us since we talked. Capture one of the council members if you wish. Again, everybody, I believe, if you don't have a green button, a sleeve of green buttons, go and pick those up. We'd love to have you vote. Again, the notes, if you want to make a comment, you can post it on one of the 4 slides here, or one over here. And again, as the administrator said, if you want to add an address, or put that address down for the building, most of us in town know if you put down, you know, the old Hardwood Hay building, we're going to know where that's at. So go ahead and do that. So, Mr. Krasinski. Hold on a minute, just a minute here.
I just walked in at the last minute, and so I apologize for upsetting the flow of the meeting, Mr. Mayor. But since I do have a vested interest kind of in one of the decisions being made here, and also have been a long time downtown supporter, I guess I would just like to encourage the decision process in the council to consider a downtown location. I as well feel strongly that no matter where the building ends up, that it's an affirmation on part of the city that they make a commitment to downtown, not only to kind of give support to the existing businesses, large and small, that work in downtown, but also to new investors like Quick Trip, who have made a decision to do business in the downtown business district as well. So I also feel as though, since I have a bit of a bias, I'll admit all that to everyone, that our location offers some great opportunities, as well as preservation of the existing city auditorium building, which will need its own amount of money committed to it over the next 10 years in terms of not only preservation, but just in maintenance, and to use those dollars the best way possible, which would also alleviate some of the other concerns of people that would route dollars for other improvements in the city, such as infrastructure and roads and what have you. So I thank you for your time. I didn't want to take a whole lot of time, but I just wanted to say a few words that I think it's really important that the city maintains its commitment to a downtown investment.
Okay, I just want to thank the committee that's been working on this. And again, Mr. Holland, our city administrator, our architect, Ingen and Associates, Bruce Peterson, Planning and Development Director, Councilmember Julie Osmus, and myself, along with Sarah Anderson, our city planner. One more question, and then we're going to button it up. And if you have comments, get to your council members, myself, or someone on the committee.
I don't have a question. It's just that when the chamber decided to move out on Highway 12, people didn't like that either, because they moved out of the city, out of downtown. It's done very well out there. It's easier to find them there than it was downtown.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all. Okay, thank you all for being here.